All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Hope that you all are well. It's been nice a couple of days, so hopefully you're able to get outside and at least breathe for a minute. I haven't been able to, but that's okay. Get one more shot at it today, hopefully. So we are in the middle of a PowerPoint, and it's about research designs. And some of this is important for our midterms, but some of it's important for your own designs too. What we're going to do today is we're going to finish off that PowerPoint. We're going to talk about your next assignment. So I have had a student assistant look at a few of your article assignments, the second one where you're choosing your own articles. And I want to go over a couple of things. I haven't had a chance to talk with her in detail about those, but I just in her looking over a couple of them, we want to make sure we know the difference between primary and secondary sources of information. So I'm going to revisit that again today, and that's okay. I mean, I think I went over that once or twice. So the repetition is key to, when you get into the thick of things and you're looking at articles and you think you found something that really relates to your topic, you want to make sure you parse out the details like, okay, is this a primary source? Is this a secondary source? Can I put this in my references? If you're using it, put it in the references. It could be a secondary source, but it still needs to go in the references. It just won't count towards the primary references. So one of the things that while I'm thinking about that, so in my own research, my own dissertation, I've written a few things, had to for PhD. It's important just to cite the sources, whether they're primary or not. Sometimes I might use a secondary source because it's necessary for me to make the point I'm trying to make in the paper. I might have had somebody reflect on, I don't know, let's just use an example like, I don't want to be too political, but let's say that we have like Jeff Bezos from Amazon has this really strong opinion about something, and yet science, totally refutes that opinion. So you might want to conclude, well, this person who's an influencer who's like, popular in our culture says this, however, science says this. So you'd want to go ahead and cite that, even though, it's like, yeah, that person didn't publish an article. That person didn't do a study. Right. And so, holding up that, is like, okay, we're making a point here because this person has this opinion, and that opinion is not supported by scientific data. So anyway, let's keep going with our PowerPoint and talk about sources of information and really study designs here is where we're at. If I remember correctly, this screen doesn't show up very well for people, so let me use my other screen. Sorry, I forget. Let's try a different one. Hold on. Doing numerous things. A couple other folks wanted to come into the meeting too. So now you can probably see my email. You don't need to see that. You don't need to see this big list of classes. You don't need to see this, but the PowerPoint's pretty important. So let's put that up. All right, now hopefully, oh my goodness. Swap. Hopefully you can now see, after much ado, hopefully you can now see the data collection techniques. Give me a thumbs up if that's what you're seeing. All right, excellent. Finally there. Okay, so I think I've just briefly mentioned last time that you could use archival data. I had a couple of people in my dissertation or my PhD cohort that used archival data for their studies. And I think Chelsea even brought that up last time with using like data from her salon. That would be archival data because it's stuff that happened in the past. You're not collecting like new data, and if you do collect new data, that's okay. But if you just want to rely on stuff that, and I think we talked about Pew Research too, that's popping up from Monday. Archives from government statistics. That's all good. You can definitely use that, and those are primary sources of information. So even though it's archival, it's still those are still primary sources of information. Any questions on that before I move forward? Okay. And so you can do a content analysis. So this is interesting. I haven't talked about this much. So this kind of goes into qualitative research. So let's say I wanted to determine the number of times, oh, I don't know, what's a good let's say I'm doing a historical project and and nobody's ever, I bet people have analyzed this, but I'm just saying this. The Abraham Lincoln used the word emancipation in speeches. And so a person could go back and analyze that and could put that in some sort of text analysis. Now we have computers that we can enter that into a text analysis, and it could come up with a number of times that emancipation was written in speech or mentioned in speeches. Same thing, it's a very basic technology like you use if you use a find feature in like a Word document. Or I hear some. Hey Rhonda, I think you got a hot mic. I'm picking up some.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. Well, all right. So cool. So yeah, you can use that like a find feature in an Adobe Acrobat document, in a PDF, in a Word document. You can use that find feature in it. Oh, hey, this person wrote the 175 times. I mean, or you could analyze the number of times somebody says I just used it twice back to back. If somebody's feeling anxious or nervous, you might notice that if you have a presentation or a speech, somebody says quite a bit when they're looking for filler. And you might also get a measure of, I don't know, of anxiety, afterwards. So you can do content analysis like that. No interaction takes place between the researcher and the participants. Case studies. So I actually designed a case study for my qualitative research class. And case studies can involve a single individual, or it can just involve like a single concept. So in my case study, I was interested in the logic behind people's decision whether or not they're going to refer a client based on their sexual orientation or gender identity. And so I was asking questions about a particular case where a person was referred. These were counselors, so it's a very small population of people, but they were counselors, and they were referred individuals who were either gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, other gender identities. And so then looking at the decision whether or not they would counsel that person or choose to refer out. The reason why that was important was because in 2014, the American Counseling Association says you can't refer out based on your own biases. And so I wanted to explore that with different with different counselors. So that was the case. I talked to a few people. You're like, well, I thought case study was like one individual. It can be. So like, let's say you're doing like a case study on outstanding play in basketball. So you might want to do like an in-depth analysis of Michael Jordan or Giannis Antetokounmpo. You might want to just pick a higher like echelon person to study something like that, where it's one case. Or you might choose like two or three, and or do these folks have something in common that make them really excel? So case studies can be interesting too. So they can be conducted for a group of individuals. Researchers often use naturalistic observations, interviews. I remember I had to use that speech analysis when I did the interviews with the counselors to try to see like themes that would come out. You're trying to, in case studies, oftentimes you're asking questions not of how much, but of why or how. when you have a why or a how question, so tune in really closely. If you have a how or a why question as a researcher, those are oftentimes qualitative designs. I'm not going to completely rule them out for you, but they do get tricky to do because you have to quantify it somehow on the back end. Most of you are going to be doing correlational studies, and that is where you're just examining relationships between variables. And the reason you're going to do correlational studies is it's usually easier to design undergraduate projects like this because I don't want you to, I don't want you to do a dissertation. I don't want you to do a master's thesis. I've had students in the past who really put their heart and soul in this, who like, hey, I want to go on, I want to be a researcher, I want to be a PhD, and they do a little bit more. But at the very least, I want people to understand the scientific method, to try to design their study with controls where they're not, where oftentimes students overstate, oftentimes people in society overstate their confidence in something like, well, I know it's this just because that's the way it is. Well, it's like looking at the horizon, and well, it just looks like that way. The earth looks flat when you look at the horizon. But I really trying to get people to control for different things. In this case, and I mentioned this too on Monday, there's still variables. There's still what's called an independent and a dependent variable. We call them by slightly different names. If you're doing a correlational study, your predictor variable is your independent variable. That's your the variable that's used to make. So because of this is related to. So for instance, if I were talking about violent crime and ice cream sales, I would state it in a way that ice cream sales can predict violent crime. So in that case, ice cream sales are my independent variable, and I'm measuring my outcome variable is violent crimes. Now there's a big problem with that because not everybody that goes out and buys an ice cream cone is going to go beat somebody up because they bought the ice cream cone. The third variable in there is heat, is more people buy ice cream in the summer. But you can see the independent and outcome variable, the independent and dependent variable in that case. So outcome variable for correlational studies are the DV or dependent variable, and the thing that's being predicted or measured on the back end. And maybe a couple of you, I haven't seen, that your ideas yet, but maybe a couple of you are wanting to come up with an experiment where you're actually trying to control for things. I did an experiment in my undergrad research project a long time ago. It didn't amount to hill beans, but I still did an experiment. And I would like a reader, because I've been talking for a little bit. Just could kind of go through those bullet points, please.
Experiment is a type of research design that involves manipulation of an independent variable, allowing control of extraneous variables that could affect the results.
Extraneous. Also would be confounds, would be things like that you haven't anticipated that could impact your results. So again, you're manipulating an independent variable, and hopefully that's the only thing that's changing between your two groups, your comparison groups. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Independent variable, a variable in an experiment that is manipulated by the researcher. Experimental group, the group of participants in an experiment that experience the treatment level of the independent variable. Control group, the group of participants in the experiment that do not experience the treatment level of the independent variable.
Okay, so control is like you just want people to just be, right? You don't want any type of other variables that you're introducing to influence them. Experimental group in a true ideal experiment is like you're just introducing that one thing, that one independent variable that hopefully then you can measure where there's a difference between groups, and you can say, yeah, because I introduced that independent variable, that's causing the difference. So that's the trick. So causation. If if you are doing an experiment, you can make causal arguments if you find a difference, if you find a significant difference. Like this variable caused that versus because people are buying ice cream, that's why they're committing violent crimes. So you can see that there, one of those has logic to it, the other one doesn't. And lastly, you'll see this in if you're reviewing things for yourself as as students trying to find literature, trying to find primary sources, you might run across quite a few of these. So in psychology, specifically when we're treating disorders, we have quite a few of these in the literature. And I'll talk why it's called a quasi experiment in just a minute. But I would like another reader if possible.
A type of research design where a comparison is made, as in an experiment, but no random assignment of participants to groups occurs.
Yeah. Okay, so and there's a key word in there to make a true experiment. If you are able to randomly assign your participants, that is going to minimize the chance of another variable, extraneous variable, confound coming into your experiment. So if you can truly randomize who goes where. So I mentioned the lady who did the fake news game last time where she did a true experiment. What she did is she had people follow a link, and with that link that she randomly assigned, whoever clicked on that link would get the internet game where they would actually try to create fake news, or just a random game where they like tried to bust bubbles and do different things that had nothing to do with fake news. So she randomly assigned this, and that way she's actually able to have the control in the experiment and say, hey, I did a true experiment. So in this case, a quasi experiment, you can't randomly assign. And we'll talk about how situations where that occurs too. Next one, next bullet point, please.
Ex post facto design, a quasi-experiment where subjects are grouped based on a characteristic they already possess, such as age or gender.
Okay. And then we also have a pre-test, post-test design. And that's a type of design, often quasi-experimental, where behavior is measured both before and after a treatment or condition is implemented. I'd argue the young lady who did the quasi-experiment on music, because there was not one group that just sat there without listening to music. Everybody, so she took behavioral readings and blood pressure readings and pulse readings before listening to music and then after. And so everybody was the baseline she used, the control group that she used there was actually within the same group, within the same participants. So that she would measure the baseline, like their blood pressure as they come into the experiment, and then as they're subjected to the other conditions, classical music, rock music, rap music, then she's getting blood pressure measurements and controlling it against their baseline measurements. So it was a quasi experiment. I really, it's a within subjects design, and those really minimize error. So officially that'd be a quasi experiment, but it was really well done. Both times people did that. Other quasi experiments often involve people who are come into treatment for anxiety or for depression or for bipolar. And so you can see, I haven't received any of these solicitations in a while, but has anybody ever been like invited or seen like, do you have depression or anxiety? Would you like to be involved in a clinical trial for a new medication? Has anybody ever seen or received that type of solicitation? So I've seen those out there. And so what they try to do in those situations is do a quasi experiment. Now it's unethical. Well, you're like, what do you mean? Because like if you're depressed, like Why wouldn't that just be a regular experiment, Taylor? Because there's some people that get a sugar pill, a placebo, and other people that actually get the Prozac or the, whatever the medication might be. Why wouldn't that be a true experiment? And I'll table that there. What kind of arguments? Why wouldn't that be a true experiment when people are coming in for depression, and one person gets a pill that's a sugar pill, and the other person gets the true medicine? There's an ethical piece here. Would it be ethical? Sorry, go ahead, Chelsea.
The patient doesn't know, the person doesn't know if they're getting the real pill or not, and that's unethical.
It is. So the patient signs a waiver, and oftentimes that's part of the risk you take is being a participant up front, and that's part of the risk people took, with the COVID experiments too, with the vaccine experiments too, is that some people got an injection of saline, when they did the COVID experiments or for the vaccines, and so that's why they were able to track, and so there's some risk involved, and so you sign off on that waiver. Many times when you're treating depression, though, or anxiety, or other really debilitating conditions, there's an ethical component, and which makes a lot of these quasi experiments. Anybody else have a thought on why many of these are quasi experiments? It's okay. I'm not giving it away. So I would actually argue there's a bit of a quasi experiment going on with the COVID vaccines, because what happens if somebody gets sick with COVID? Do they then just don't treat them? I think that's unethical, right? So with a vaccine, I would say it's more likely to be a true experiment with like the COVID vaccine versus depression. Because if I'm going to a doctor and they're giving me a screen for depression and I click I'm suicidal, I may go home and I may kill myself after we meet today. What's the problem if that person is in the placebo group, is in the control group and not the experimental group?
They're not getting the help they need.
Yeah. So Chelsea, you're on the right track. So oftentimes in the literature, when you're dealing with psychological conditions, and you may have run across this in your own literature reviews, you'll see quasi experiments in that you'll have treatment as usual. It's usually called TAU, treatment as usual. And so, yeah, okay, I'm going to give this person who's suicidal, yeah, they're going to go in the control group and not get the actual medicine, but I'm still going to give them therapy. I'm still going to get them to the hospital. They're still going to get treated. And so it's not like as a researcher, it's not like we're doing nothing. And so it's important that when we have comparison groups like that, oftentimes you'll have treatment as usual, treatment with therapy and the pill, treatment with therapy only. And so you'll often see a quasi experiment where you have many groups and you're comparing the each to the other and which outcomes are the best. So it's still an experiment, but it doesn't have completely true control over everything. Is that kind of making sense a little bit? We'll go over that more. Okay, let's see here. Screen one. The main thing that would make an experiment would be true randomization. If you're able to argue, I've truly randomized these people, not in controlled for all that I can, you could make an argument you're doing a true experiment. All right, let me stop there. Questions along the way at this point? All right, well, let's talk about your next assignment. I'm going to pull up the syllabus. Actually, let's just do this. Okay. So, assignments. here's where you're going to submit your next assignment. It's a written proposal or abstract. So, and this is due, so we all have a date in mind. I think it's due Monday, if I remember right. Yeah, it's due the 5th. So the 5th would be Monday. So it's right around the corner. So now, if you're still kind of up in the air on what you want to do and you don't have a good idea, now's the time to really bring that funnel in. Like, okay, now's the time when I really have to like sit down. This is my first real hard deadline that I need to make sure I'm doing something well. And the reason why is from like this point forward in the class, things are going to pick up quickly, and time is going to go really quickly for you because you're going to be having dialogues back and forth with me. You're going to be doing assignments. You're going to be doing a lot of writing. And I'd argue between now and March 1st, you'll be doing your most critical writing as a student since you're in pre-K. So it's like, this is the time to let your own creative writing juices shine to like all the abilities that you've accumulated over the years as a student, as a person, you know, who's able to think and illustrate, you know, knowledge. Now's the time for all those things to come out and shine. And so this is going to require now, if you haven't already, it's going to require a few hours at least to put blinders on, turn the phone off, turn the other notifications off, and get this thing done. So if you did that article assignment, so all of you had, let me put the screen back up for you. All of you had, not the survey evaluation, sorry, the second article evaluation, and that was the one where you came up with your own sources. The biggest thing that I want to make sure we look at here is primary versus secondary source. Again, and I'm going to ask you all, and I'll keep notes on my screen, what is the difference between a primary source of information and a secondary source of information? So I know this looks like me scribbling on a chalkboard, and it kind of is. Versus, and I'll just put secondary, second for secondary.
I have a weird question. Can I ask that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Why don't they separate that in Google searches, like in Scholar? Why don't they separate it for us, primary versus secondary, or indicate it that it's a primary? Is that just not something that's anybody's ever thought of?
Well, so
You know, when they
I
list things.
it might be difficult for a search engine to truly do that.
That's true, because it's sometimes difficult when you look through them to figure it out, truly figure it out, because so that's probably
I'm gonna
it.
throw a curveball in the middle of primary, and that's supposed to say analysis there. So there, and I would say meta-analysis is kind of a hybrid of both, but I would consider it a primary source for your reasons here. Again, how can you recognize a primary source of information?
It's got to have your abstract or all these down here.
Methods
Your
include how many
methods.
participants.
Abstract, literature review, methods, results, discussion, references. Your primary source always will have those. It will also include things like stats, number of participants, the stats used, the results of the stats. So, you know, those kind of key hallmarks are showing you, yeah, this is a primary source of information. There's data collection. New data is collected, right? That's the key to science, the observation. Like there's new data that's collected and we're observing it and we're trying to make sense of it. Secondary sources of information are literature reviews. And so this was the big thing I saw, or at least I heard from the student assistant, is that people are looking at literature reviews and identifying those as primary sources. And those are not, so just because something's in Google Scholar and has a doctor's name beside it, doesn't mean it's a primary source of information. And this is so we're going a layer with more depth here. Okay, so who felt like they had a really good source of information in their assignment? Like, I feel pretty solid. Colby, you found a good one?
Yeah, I think I did.
Okay, I won't show what you pulled up, but can I pull up like one of your articles from the assignment?
Yeah.
All right, give me just a minute. I'm gonna find Colby's. Again, there's no grades here. I'm just gonna try to find what Colby submitted. And I appreciate you being a guinea pig here, man. Good, bad, or ugly. So which one? So it looks like you got a couple. Is it the first or second one?
Oh, hold on, I need to pull it up myself, actually.
So one of them is behavioral assessment in youth sports, and then the other one is impact of positive reinforcement.
I think it's the second one.
Okay, I'm gonna pull this one up. My computer, just a second here. All right, I'm gonna share my screen again. Okay. All right, so what we've got here is there's another thing I'm looking at. All right, let's see what he's got. So we've got, first off is it looks like it's from a journal, because it's got volume 5, and so it's from the International Journal. I didn't mention that just a second ago, but that's one of the hallmarks of primary source, is it's in a peer-reviewed journal. So far looking good. International Journal of Physical Education and Sports Sciences. Looks like this thing's been around a little while. It's got 3 authors. Impact of positive reinforcement theory on weightlifters' performance. It's got the abstract, looking good. It's got a citation in there. Positive reinforcement theory developed by B.F. Skinner. Yeah, I would agree that was a Skinner thing. Although I'd want to cite Skinner. I don't know why they're citing Gordon 2014. Let's see here. So really kind of going in, said they had a paired sample t-test. They're looking at weightlifters. Looking good. Okay. So I have a trick question. Everybody tune in on this. It's a trick question. I'm reading this, and it says Olympic style weightlifting is an indoor strength sport having 2 different events, a snatch and a clean and jerk. In both these events, separately, competitors display their power. Show aims to win the contest. The one who ends with cumulative lifted more in total wins the competition. So would it be good for me to say, this is a primary source. I'm just going to take this sentence by Walker and put it in my own. What do y'all think about that? Is that now? I got to have a primary source, right? Randolph said it's primary source. Is this good? This is a trick. So many students get tripped up on this. I don't want you, so tune in. So Isabella, Isaac, I can't see you. Fernando, I can't see you. Tune in. Beatrice, tune in because this is important, okay? Ken, is this now? Because I see the one who ends with cumulatively lifted more in total wins the competition. What if I just use Walker 2016? Is that a primary source? Did I just cite a primary source?
Not exactly. You
No.
cite a source within a primary source.
Well, Colby said no. Colby, I like where you're going. Why is that not okay?
Because you don't really have a clue. They don't have to only be primary sources in your work. They can be secondary sources.
You don't know where Walker is. You don't know what they may have pulled a secondary source here. But Randolph, you told me I could just find this information at a primary source. And so let's say I go down here and I want to see, what about Diedrich 2010, huh? So Diedrich 2010 said, previous studies suggest involvement of positive reinforcement as a way to deal with this problem effectively because theory proposes that when a reinforcer needs the desired outcome of learners, it can be acquired by using positive reinforcement strategies such as tangible and intangible rewards. I can't tell you the number of students who have done this. I'm just taking this. It can be acquired by using some positive such as tangible and intangible rewards. Now, who do I cite? Do I cite Diedrich or do I cite Fayez, Afshin, and Khan? I want to use this, Randolph. This is exactly what I wanted to say. What's wrong with this?
It might be paraphrased. It might not be exactly what Dietrich said.
It might be paraphrased. It might not be a primary source. The problem here, so tune in. This is the key. Don't cite other people's literature review. What? Because a literature review is what? Chelsea, you just mouthed it out. Secondary. Yeah, a literature review is, but it's within a primary source. Yes, every primary source is going to have a literature review. So that trips so many students up over the years. Tune in right now. Don't do that. Stay focused on the prize. The prize is what these people found, which is Fayez, Afshin, and Khan. Where you find what they found is in the abstract. It's also at the tail end of their results. Now, yeah, some of these stats might get a little wordy. Results is that's all original. This is all primary stuff. They're stats, but it's sometimes hard to weed your way through stats. So here's their conclusion. Read this. This paraphrase what they found in their results. Also, at the end of the results, usually they paraphrase what they found. Okay, that's where the primary, so if you want to cite, this is now primary information because those researchers are reflecting on what they found. Does that make sense? Are y'all tracking with me? Because I don't want people, go ahead, Beatrice.
I said yes. I can track you. Sorry about the frame. I don't know why it's doing this.
No, that's all right. So I just want to make sure that what I've had before is I've had some people write some really disjointed literature reviews themselves because all they did is they looked at all the other people's literature reviews and then tried to make those literature reviews their literature review. And I was like, no, it doesn't mean that you just throw out. Just follow me one more second on this. We'll bring it in for a landing. It doesn't mean that you just throw out this Diedrich because you're like, Diedrich 2010, that was something that I really wanted to talk about. What should you do if you find something in somebody else's literature review that they cited and you're really interested in it?
Do you cite them instead of that?
No, nope. You better do something else, Rhonda.
Go to the references and find that work.
Colby got it. Absolutely. You go digging. You go, you know what? I want to find what Diedrich 2010 did because I want to cite that. I want to use that for my own paper. So use your literature review to help yourself, like, and the work somebody else has done. I can't tell you the number of times I've read something that was kind of related to my topic, but in that literature review, I found golden nuggets. I was like, that's exactly my topic. And then I went and dug further and put that name in Google Scholar, and then I had my primary source. So it doesn't mean just completely throw that information out. It means dig some more. So I can find Diedrich 2010. I can go to this person's references page. And unless they made a mistake as a researcher and didn't cite, and that you'll find that every once in a while, nobody's perfect. You'll find, oh, but look, this person cited Diedrich 2010. So I can then just copy and paste this, Control C. I can go into Scholar. There's Google Scholar. And I'll just copy and paste that into the tagline, and it'll find it. Boom. And it brings up one, because that's Diedrich. And I've got a PDF. So now I'm digging into a primary source. I bet this is a primary source. And I better double check to make sure this is a primary source. Ooh, interesting. So this is a master's thesis. So this isn't actually published in, so you can see here, this wasn't actually published in a journal. This was a thesis. So that'd still be a primary source, but it'd be like a second tier primary source. It's like, let's see if it's actually a primary source. Did they actually get data? Because sometimes thesis, like if you do a thesis at Northwestern, you're just really doing an in-depth lit review and coming out with some new ideas. You're not really getting data. So I'm concerned here. I'd have to go to page 29. I mean, obviously I didn't, this is all just on the fly. Did they actually collect data? And if they didn't collect data, I wouldn't even use this as a source. I just say, I just barked up and sometimes, oh look, they got participants, 3,950 students, 1,000 students in need. So they might have actually collected data. But if they didn't, I'd be real tempted to just say, I barked up the wrong tree. I need to find another source. And sometimes that happens. Questions on that? Hopefully y'all are tuning in, because this will help you where you're not, going off, on a tangent that's not really supported in research.
Okay, so my question with that, and I know it might make sense to everybody else, but if I'm doing that and, you're saying not to cite that, but I go in there and I do some research, but it's from them. So isn't that still citing the same thing? Am I not asking that right? I mean, so I don't.
Tracking.
I don't know. I'll talk to you later about it.
My biggest point here is if you're looking for and you should be looking for primary sources of information, is track down that original source. My biggest point for doing this right here is a lot of students get trapped in looking at other people's literature review and then just using that. No, you need to go to that primary source, evaluate it for yourself, and see if it's actually valid for your study. That's the big thing to take away here. So Colby, I would say yes, you found a valid source, a primary source of information, because it looks like that the original thing that we were looking at here, which I know we went off on a tangent, which that's what research does. Research, it's easy if you can stay focused. That's the biggest thing, is just staying on task on research, because you get. So let's say we got a call from somebody, or we started texting, or something on social media popped up. This takes a lot of brain power to stay on topic. If you get like distracted in the middle of this, you're not going to get done. So you're going to have to carve out time to be able to type and write about this and think about this. Because if you live your average life where you're just like, yeah, I'm doing this, and I'll spend 5 minutes doing this. Research takes like dedicated hours of blinders on, which is why not everybody does it. Which is why it's easier to get on social media, look on Twitter, and say, oh, there's my information. All right, so to go back, if I can go all the way back into what Colby submitted. Colby, you found a journal. It looks like they collected data. I didn't see their exact numbers in their abstract, but I'm assuming they did. And I'm assuming they ran some statistics on that data. And if that's the case, then yes, you got a primary source. Go back to the whiteboard. So there's one other way, and I'd say this is just as important as the others. The article was published in a peer-reviewed journal. So this meta-analysis may be kind of I mean, it can be really good. Meta-analysis just summarized all of these things. Now, a true meta-analysis, people did their own stats by reviewing literature and looking at the results and the statistics, and then they ran their own statistics to try to find. So I'm including meta-analysis as a primary source. Literature reviews, even literature reviews in primary sources, are still secondary sources. All right. Let's get straight into your assignment, because those things were necessary to go over to make sure nobody got off on the wrong track. This is the thing to work on. And what I'll do, because I promised a work day Friday, what I'll do is I'll log into class and I'll be here for questions. But let's get straight to your assignment that's due for Monday. And this would be it right here, your written proposal or abstract. And in your written proposal, I want to know what is or are your research question or questions. This is very important. Please write out your research question or questions. No more than 2. If you start to get 3 or more, it starts to get really like, now I'm doing a dissertation. So no more than 2, please. And those questions should be written so you're dealing with your conceptual variables that are way out here, not operationalized quite yet. Then I want to know your independent or predictor variables. What will you be controlling or manipulating or predicting? Please narrowly define, this is important, please narrowly define your independent or predictor variable as much as possible. I want to see this operationalized as much as possible. And then, I'm not sharing my screen, sorry. And then, what is your dependent or outcome variable? What will you measure? So, and this takes a minute. So our next assignment comes from this question. How will you validly measure your dependent variable? If you're creating your own questions, I'm going to question you on if it's a real valid measurement. You have to really provide some arguments why it's valid. What instrument or instruments will you use to measure your dependent variable? And then finally, what is your hypothesis, or what are your hypotheses? What do you think you'll find? If you want to write this in abstract and get started on your actual paper, an abstract is basically these things here. And so if you look at the if you look at the last slide that we had for today, the last slide looked like this. So then this could be your informal written proposal. In this case, the role of perceived gender of an infant and the gender of adolescents on ratings of the infant will be explored. 36 junior high school students, this wouldn't be approved through our university because we can't study kids. 36 junior high students, 18 boys and 18 girls, will view a photo of a 3-month-old infant. Students will be told the infant's name is either Larry, Laurie, or they will not be, so there's 3 groups, or they will not be told the infant's name. Each student will rate the infant on 6 bipolar, not meaning depression, bipolar adjective scales: firm or soft, big or little, strong, weak, hardy, delicate, well-coordinated, awkward, beautiful, plain. It is predicted Oh, crud. It is predicted that both the name assigned to the infant and the study's student's gender will affect ratings. Implications of the results for parenting and for future research will be discussed. There's a lot of things going on in there. Now, what they didn't do here is that they didn't define the independent and dependent variable. I want you guys to define your independent and dependent variables, your predictor and your outcome variables. That was a like big bomb of an assignment at the very end here. What are your thoughts? I see some anxiety in faces. And that's okay, because we have to get started somewhere. We got to get started now. All right. Here's the thing. I will be here. I will tune in. I will open the room for those of you that want to attend. For those of you that want to use the hour to just do the thing and just work on it and get your articles and think and really think out your design. Really think out what you want to do. It's time to like where the rubber meets the road. It's time to like, okay, here's what I'm actually doing. I had all this in my head. Now I'm putting it down and showing it to Professor Randolph, showing it to Dr. Randolph so we can see if this is actually something we can do. All right. Gang, I will be here. Like I said, I'll log in. I'll open Zoom for questions. But other than that, I want to know what you're going to do. Yes, Rhonda.
Okay, so those of us that are got two or more or two or three on this paper, we turn in the exact same abstract, correct? Like,
And then you all three will contribute to that idea unless one of you wants to go your own way. Yeah. And if you're working with another student, yeah, here's where you really combine ideas and come together and you would submit the same thing, yes. Because that way you're getting the same feedback.
So we only sign in to Zoom on Friday if we have a question.
Otherwise, use this time you paid for it as students to work. This is your unadulterated hour where you put on the blinders, where you don't have your phone on, and you get your thoughts down on paper. If that's the only time you have. Otherwise, I'd encourage you to carve time out. Otherwise, and start getting these things done. Okay, gang. Take care. If you need me, I'll be here Friday. Otherwise, if you want to work, use Friday as a work day. Monday is mandatory, so I'll see y'all back here on Monday, at least. All right, take care, buddy. See you soon.